The dark side of Monterrey, which is where I'm from in Mexico, holds hundreds of chilling stories.
One of its most terrifying times, around the years 2009 and 2010, is still remembered.
Its streets stained red, like the setting of a horror movie, still bring back memories that are hard to believe. Revenge, violence, and a war that seemed to have no end. They exposed what the most important cartels in the country are capable of. Who has the final say? Who laughs last? Or what are the consequences of getting involved with the wrong side? For Gabriela Elizabeth Muñiz Tames, alias the Redhead, it was a first-hand experience. She ended up hanging from a rope at the height of a pedestrian bridge located on Gonzalitos Avenue as a result of retaliation. Almost without clothes and with a message written on her chest, she was exposed to passers-by. Women, men, and anyone passing by at the time of the discovery were shocked by this heartbreaking image that undoubtedly remained etched in their minds forever. The city was paralyzed with the news. Now, how many people on the avenues? That was the question the astonished inhabitants were asking themselves.
Fear took over Monterrey.
Going out for a walk or even going to work was a toss-up, as the possibility of finding oneself in the middle of a brawl between opposing sides was increasingly high. Corruption was nothing out of the ordinary, with Mexico being one of the countries most characterized by it. However, for Monterrey, it was extremely difficult to escalate to the level of violence that was reached at that time. Undoubtedly, this attack was a before and after in the history of organized crime. But how did this woman get to be published in this way on a pedestrian bridge? When she was just 20 years old, she was known by her family and friends as Gaby. From the outside, her life seemed like that of any girl her age. She established a loving bond, got married, and had her firstborn. However, shortly after, she separated and started another relationship with a pawn shop owner who curiously suddenly vanished from the face of the earth. She heard nothing more from him, but the girl's steps were gradually leading to shady things. For example, the romantic relationship she established with a man known as Victor alias El Tiznado, alleged boss of a criminal gang. It was from then on that Gaby began to earn the nickname of the Redhead, as her role was not only limited to being the girlfriend of, but she gradually delved into the world of crime. Extortion of merchants was the basis on which she established her reputation, but that only served to awaken one of the most fearsome monsters, which was greed. Her desire to earn exuberant amounts of money made her one of the most ruthless explorers ever known. This illicit business that leaves multi-million-dollar profits to organized crime and whose result placed Mexico in the world ranking with approximately 8,000 cases annually. Her lack of empathy and violence gave her what was necessary to take the leader's position. However, she was not just any kidnapper, as a small detail set her apart from the rest.
Her main victims were members of her own family.
It is known that the Redhead had the feat of depriving one of her cousins of his freedom, who apparently honorably worked at a trailer company. However, he became the woman's target for being none other than the owner of said company. This woman acted through the modality of express kidnapping, something that suddenly became normalized in our country, which in fact happened to me, this express kidnapping, but well, this is another story. She charged $1.5 million pesos for the ransom, which was given to her in full due to the bloody threats she used, regardless of whether it was her own blood, who she perhaps had tied up hands and feet somewhere in the world for about 4 consecutive hours. The transaction was quick and effective, giving her security, but above all, the tools to continue executing such atrocities since, as if that were not enough. After a few months, she followed the same steps, hoping to get away with it. Again, a relative became a target. This time, the man owned a restaurant, had a way to afford a high ransom, and that was something the perpetrator would take advantage of, regardless of her blood tie with the victim. With the previous success then, and the hunger for more cash, she took her cousin to a secret place there. He was threatened with removing parts of his body in case his family did not pay what she was asking for. On the other hand, the woman decided to pose as a member of a certain mafia cartel just to expedite the exchange, although perhaps the most effective hook was the message she was in charge of sending, where she assured that if the payment was not made, the man would be returned. But in parts, her alias, the Redhead, began to sound everywhere she was a respected and recognized woman. However, her freedom did not last long, since on July 8, 2009, she faced justice for the first time. Gabriela Elizabeth was arrested and charged in 2009 by elements of the State Investigation Agency as an alleged member of a gang of kidnappers operating in the Citrus region. At that moment, the woman had no idea that it was the beginning of her tragic and heartbreaking demise. Things began to change, especially for her only son, who was left in the care of his grandmother and with whom he went to live in the United States, far from his mother's chaotic life. Instead, his father became a frequent visitor to the prison. There, the situation was very tense. Despite her tough and problematic girl attitude, her fame as the Redhead pursued her, and nothing she did could have changed her fate, much less a simple hair color change. She was blonde, but I was still giving them beauty classes, lately. So, she had dyed her hair, that's why they called her the Redhead. After her arrest, it took a month for her to be transferred to her cell in the Topo Chico prison, where there were none other than inmates from the cartel opposed to her side, which only meant one thing: a difficult stay full of the consequences of her stormy past.
Look, she got there and she was from a cartel of the cartel of...
So then everyone there was from the other side. They took me as their crying shoulder suddenly when we finished the class. "Oh, teacher, I'm worried." As if her life wasn't complicated enough already, Gabriela Elizabeth had told her beauty class teacher that she had fallen in love with one of the inmates from the cells next to the women's prison, who to her bad luck was part of the opposing side to which she had always shown supposed loyalty, especially for having a partner outside of prison who belonged to that criminal group. So that's where all the attacks began. To the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome patients so they could rape her, so they could beat her. The girl, when the guard took her out, she told me another one of those, and another inmate told me. By that time, she had already served a year and a half of her sentence and was 31 years old. It was then the month of December 2010, and according to the account of Professor Elba, the woman was brutally assaulted within the cells of the male prison. The guard took her out, another one of those told me, another inmate told me. When she took her out of where she had her, that guard, and when she took her, the girl was already dead. In this version, it is claimed that the one known as the Redhead had already lost her life at the time of the alleged attack, after which she ended up with a rope around her neck. Dead or alive at the time, this event caused great fear inside the cells of Topo Chico. The power struggle was not only on the streets, but it also penetrated the walls and bars of the prison. There, the situation was much more tense. Another lady, one of those strong ladies, kind of like a chola too, and that lady crying told me, "Teacher, I want to leave, I want to leave." Notice that they did this and this to the Redhead. She says, "And I'm very scared because the attack against us is going to happen." Without a doubt, the reprisals were not long in coming. Any false move and a new target was detected, for example, helping or assisting someone who supposedly should not meant paying a high price, and I'm not talking about money. Well, this guard who was taken away, she knew that when she left the prison, that the doctor also discharged her to go to the hospital, that halfway there, they kidnapped the ambulance and took her out and hung her, but the girl was already dead. That guard was the one they found in pieces in the human immunodeficiency virus, that is, for having helped her. And well, all those things, well, that was what impacted me the most. First-hand account by Elba Galindo, who had direct contact with the inmates, guards, and officers who looked after the prison. However, it is precisely this version that differs from the one that was made public, considering that the forensic doctor who performed the autopsy assures that the woman was alive at the time of being exposed on the pedestrian bridge. In this version, it is said that on December 27, 2010, the Redhead was released to be treated for a stomach hematoma. This was prescribed by the on-duty doctor at the prison, who later confessed to having received threats that they were going to give him the neck if he didn't let her out. Then an ambulance was requested where she would be transferred to the university hospital, a destination she never reached. The guards Maria Dolores Poblano Lugo, Jorge Aldala Pereira, and Jose Luis Moneda Guevara were escorting the woman in the process, but after 5 minutes on the road, an armed commando intercepted them in the middle of the street, taking Muniz Tamés in what initially seemed like a rescue or prison break. What came next was unexpected. The commando was found hanging with a message on a pedestrian bridge in Nuevo León this morning. Gabriela Elizabeth Muniz Tamés, alias the Redhead, who had been arrested in 2009 for leading a gang of kidnappers. Gabriela Elizabeth was arrested and charged in 2009 by elements of the State Investigation Agency as an alleged member of a gang of kidnappers operating in the Citrus region. Around 7 in the morning, the swaying of a nearly naked body could be seen on Gonzalitos Avenue with the word Yair that written on the chest. I tell you again, you can't see it in this video because the image is very strong, but if you go to Google, you will surely find it. Returning, she was soon identified as the leader of the gang of kidnappers operating in the municipality of Allende and who had served just a year and a half in prison. The message was attributed different meanings, such as being chosen by the gods for exemplary punishment, since Yair is of Hebrew origin, whose meaning refers to being the enlightened one, as already mentioned, chosen by the gods. That name was also considered to be that of her current partner from one of the criminal gangs she was involved with. But the most sinister debate is undoubtedly whether she was still alive or no longer breathing at the time of being suspended in the air, since, as the former prison teacher mentioned, the woman had already died, although this hypothesis differs from the forensic Dr. Villagomez, who wrote in his report, "Muniz lost her life by hanging. She was not abused." Whatever it may have been, the truth is still considered a historical fact in the world of organized crime, being this the first woman to be hanged in this way, exposed to passers-by and the entire city dictating a simple, clear and concise message. In a dramatic turn of events, the lights of justice finally catch up to one of the most elusive characters in Mexican organized crime. Edgar Valdez Villarreal, known as La Barbie, is captured in a police operation that puts an end to years of playing on the edge with the law. Edgar Valdez Villarreal was born on August 11, 1973 in Laredo, Texas, holding both Mexican and American nationality. His story began at United High School, where his American football coach gave him the nickname that would accompany him for the rest of his life, that is, La Barbie. This arose from his pale skin, blonde hair, and clear eyes, creating a resemblance to Ken Carson, the iconic companion of the Barbie doll. Valdez's arrest record began at 18 years old in Texas. At the end of his preparatory stage in 1992, he faced a detention for negligent homicide after being caught driving in the wrong direction and running over a school teacher. Subsequently, this charge was dropped, but these episodes marked the first chapters of a life that would take an even darker turn. Abandoning conventional paths, Valdez Villarreal delved into the world of narcotics while still attending high school on the streets of Laredo. Seduced by the prospect of quick money, the young entrepreneur decided to reject his father's offer to finance his college education, opting instead to focus on the burgeoning illicit business. Barbie's criminal trajectory quickly attracted the attention of the authorities. At the age of 21, in 1994, his name echoed in police files once again when he was arrested in Springfield, Missouri. This time, a drug trafficking arrest warrant issued by a New Orleans federal district court marked a crucial turning point in the young trafficker's life. With the shadow of American justice looming over him, Valdez Villarreal crossed the river into Mexico in 1998, finding refuge in Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas. There he joined the local gang Los Chachos, who completely controlled the trafficking of illegal substances in the city. In an unexpected twist, Barbie's path intertwined with the dangerous Sinaloa federations led by the Beltran Leiva brothers, who were partners at that time with Joaquin El Chapo. His ability to establish connections in the United States, recruit police and military for the cartel's cause, and his friendship with Marcos Arturo Beltran Leiva, alias El Barbas, the cartel's boss, earned him a rapid rise in the criminal group's ranks. Barbie's life, on the other hand, has been full of controversies. One of the most surprising aspects is that despite his prominent role in the Federation and his apparent loyalty to the Beltran Leyva brothers, Barbie acted as an informant for the Drug Enforcement Administration, the United States Anti-Drug Agency. In 2004, for example, he sought to have the charges against him dropped by the Texas Department of Justice, but he refused to betray those who had given him importance within the Federation by rejecting Chapo Guzman and Arturo Beltran Leyva. According to an official document that journalist Nabel Hernandez had access to, it was revealed that from 2008 to 2010, he collaborated with the Drug Enforcement Administration and the Federal Bureau of Investigation as an informant through an intermediary. This double life as an informant was completely unknown both to his partners in the drug world and to the corrupt officials he claimed to pay hefty bribes to, including the former Secretary of Federal Public Security, Genaro Garcia Luna. So, as he advanced in the organized crime scene, Barbie found himself embroiled in a fierce struggle for control of the plaza at the end of 2004. His opponent, the fearsome group of the Zetas, the armed wing of the Gulf Cartel. The epicenter of this battle was the strategic plaza of Nuevo Laredo, a border territory where approximately 7,000 daily crossings to the United States were made, according to data from the Procuraduría General de la República. Surprisingly, only 10% of these crossings could be checked, making this place one of the most coveted by mobsters and human traffickers. After Tijuana to San Diego, where up to 50,000 vehicles crossed per day. The conflict was not only limited to Nuevo Laredo, but also waged a fierce fight for control of the strategic port of Acapulco. The territorial war in the world of drug trafficking was at its peak, and Barbie played a crucial role in this deadly conflict. These are the images and sounds of one of the bloodiest confrontations that the federal police have had with hitmen from the Gulf Cartel in the streets of Reynosa, Tamaulipas. This story gets even more complicated with the formation of Los Negros. A group emerged to confront the operations of the Gulf Cartel and its feared armed wing, Los Zetas. However, after the fracture between the Beltran Leyva cartel and the Sinaloa cartel, Los Negros redirected their loyalty by allying with the Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas. Under the command of Valdez Villarreal and overseen by the Sanchez brothers in Mexico, this criminal group has woven a complex network, even employing gangs like the Mexican Mafia and Mara Salvatrucha to carry out illegal activities, including taking lives. Initially rooted in Tamaulipas, Los Negros have expanded their tentacles towards Nuevo Laredo and the states of Coahuila. Their criminal presence is also evident in San Luis Potosí, Veracruz, Michoacán, Guerrero, Zacatecas, Morelos, and Sonora, showing a network covering a large part of Mexico. The battle also marked the beginning of a cartel war that left thousands of victims and that, in some regions of Mexico, still persists. Valdez Villarreal emerged as the closest figure to Arturo Beltran Leyva, even remaining by his side when the Capo and his brothers broke their alliances with the Sinaloa cartel. La Barbie went through a period of silence, but his name resurfaced in December 2009 when Navy forces carried out an operation in Cuernavaca, Morelos. This operation aimed to capture Arturo Beltran Leyva, known as El Barbas and leader of La Barbie. According to unofficially unrefuted versions, Valdez Villarreal would have met with Beltran Leyva moments before his death. It is speculated that in the apartment where the boss was hiding, an opulent meal was being prepared, supposedly to receive a high-ranking Mexican army officer. After the operation that resulted in Barbas' death, the idea that Barbie had betrayed him was spread. Loyalty in the murky world of drug trafficking proved to be as ephemeral as it was lethal. Among a dark history of homicides, trafficking of illegal substances, and other crimes, Barbie left a grim legacy in Mexico, the foundation of the Union Tepito, a criminal group that has established itself as the strongest in operation in Mexico City and the main generator of chaos in the metropolitan area. Journalistic investigations revealed that in 2009, Barbie summoned all the families that traditionally dedicated themselves to the sale of substances in the infamous Bravo neighborhood of Tepito. He proposed that they unite under his tutelage, and those who accepted to be part of this union fell under the leadership of Pancho Calagua, who was executed, by the way, in the year 2017. Since that moment, the Tepito Union has been expanding its influence in the center of the country. Their criminal activity ranges from extortion, sale of substances, deprivation of liberty, piracy to taking lives, leaving in their wake a wave of violence that to this date the authorities continue to struggle to dismantle. According to the Procuraduría General de la República, Edgar Valdez Villarreal disputed the leadership of the Beltrán Leiva organization with Sergio Villarreal Barragán, known as El Grande, whose territory covered Coahuila, and with Héctor Beltrán Leiva, identified as the group's asset launderer. Valdez Villarreal was better positioned among the three and had the backing of the Sinaloa cartel, led by El Chapo Guzman. But on August 30th, 2010, the operation that led to Barbie's arrest was carried out with precision. The Mexican Federal Police managed to locate his hideout in a country house near the town of Salazar in Cañada de Alferez, state of Mexico. The operation was executed swiftly and decisively, culminating in the arrest of the drug lord. This arrest marked the end of the escape of one of the most wanted criminals, putting an end to the manhunt that the authorities had been carrying out for a considerable amount of time. In addition to the charges in Mexico for drug trafficking and homicide, it was revealed that Barbie was facing proceedings in the United States for distribution of substances, adding an international component to her criminal profile. On the other hand, Valdez Villarreal's father-in-law, Carlos Montemayor Gonzalez, was also arrested in Mexico City on November 23, 2010, thus contributing to the dismantling of a key part of the cartel structure. At the time of his presentation to journalists after his capture in 2010, Barbie maintained a constant smile. This gesture caused controversy in the country, as many interpreted it as a mockery towards the authorities. Valdez Villarreal's facial expressions sparked debate about his attitude towards justice and the public perception of his arrest. La Barbie allegedly provided United States authorities with details about the corrupt scheme of high-ranking Mexican government officials in their dealings with drug traffickers. He described how these officials shared sensitive information with major cartels such as the Sinaloa cartel and the Beltrán Leiva. According to reports, Valdez witnessed how Mexican officials handed over identities, photographs, and locations of undercover Drug Enforcement Administration agents to these two cartels. The United States government, for its part, acknowledged a document that, thanks to the information provided by Barbie, they were able to save the lives of their agents. Later, in November 2012, Valdez Villarreal gave journalist Anabel Hernandez a letter signed by him in which he claimed to have given millionaire bribes to Genaro Garcia Luna and his close collaborators. In the same letter, the boss alleged that the president at that time, Felipe Calderón, was leading meetings with mobsters. These revelations shed light on the depth of corruption that remains in the upper echelons of the Mexican government. In 2010, President Felipe Calderón summoned the leaders of the country's drug cartels to close a deal with all factions of organized crime. Then in 2015, this character was extradited to the United States, where 3 years later, a court in Atlanta, Georgia, sentenced him to 49 years and 1 month in prison, along with a fine of $192 million. This sentence was the result of his guilty plea for 4 drug trafficking offenses and 1 money laundering offense, a decision made to avoid the life sentence that was hanging over him. The prosecutor in the case argued that Valdez Villarreal imported tons of this illegal white powder substance, you know which one I'm referring to, into the United States while ruthlessly advancing to the highest ranks of one of Mexico's most powerful cartels, leaving countless lives destroyed by violence in his wake. In June 2018, the mobster was sentenced to 49 years and 1 month in prison in the United States. However, in 2022, his name disappeared from the list of inmates in custody in the records of the United States Federal Bureau of Prisons. His name disappeared from the list of inmates in custody in the records of the United States Federal Bureau of Prisons. The official page indicates that he is not in the custody of the Bureau of Prisons, which is the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The American authorities have not yet revealed the whereabouts or the current situation of Barbie. Despite this absence in the records, a spokesperson for the Bureau of Prisons clarified that this does not necessarily mean that Valdez Villarreal is free. In response, Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador stated that his government has sought explanations from the United States. These changes in the official prisoner registry coincide with the eve of the trial against Genaro Garcia Luna, whose process has been constantly postponed since January 2023. In addition, there is a rumor circulating that Barbie could be considered a star witness in this trial. The uncertainty surrounding his legal situation also adds a new element of intrigue to the complex story of the drug trafficker. The illicit activities coordinated by Valdez Villarreal generated huge profits that allowed him to integrate into a social circle where luxuries, weapons, and excesses were part of his daily routine. La Barbie bought and also bankrupted the Atlético Veragüense football team in Panama, paying $300,000 for the club. After his arrest in 2010, the team faced obvious financial problems that affected the salaries of players and the team's technical staff. In 2019, Atlético Veragüense disappeared after being disaffiliated by the Panamanian Football Federation. He was seeking recognized status, as you realize, and lived apart in constant celebration. During the first decade of the 2000s, it was common to see the lieutenant of the Beltran Leiva in the most exclusive clubs of Acapulco, Mexico City, and other states of Mexico. With his well-groomed appearance, white skin, light brown hair, and a fake northern accent, he presented himself in social circles as a businessman and engineer by profession. Obtaining money through violence, he spent it on luxury items such as suits, shirts, shoes, and watches from very exclusive brands. Even on the day of his arrest, he was wearing a distinctive green Ralph Lauren polo shirt. His assets included properties in exclusive subdivisions and high-end vehicles. Annabel Hernandez had access to testimonies from those close to Barbie that revealed his ties not only with politicians and officials whom he bribed, but also with prominent personalities from the entertainment world in Mexico. From actress and model Arlette Terán, with whom he was romantically linked, to Sergio Mayer, Isabella Camil, Jenny Rivera, the comedian Platanito, the Masca brothers, and even the musical group Intocable, Barbie accumulated recognition in the most popular social circles of the time. In addition, the meetings took place in clubs like Baby O in Acapulco or Bar Bar in Mexico City, according to witnesses who spoke to the renowned journalist. And it is precisely in this last place where one of the biggest controversies involving him unfolded. In the early morning of January 25th, 2010, this player, Salvador Cabañas, was shot in the head while he was with his wife at the Bar Bar in Mexico City. That same morning, Cabañas underwent surgery, and it was reported that his health condition was serious but stable. The Attorney General's Office of the Federal District identified Jose Jorge Valderas Garza, alias Jesus El Joji J, or El Modelo, as the aggressor through a recording from a closed-circuit camera. In addition, 3 people were arrested for particular resistance. Because later I put him in one of my offices. Where? In Antizapan. He was there for about 3 months. The case of Barbie reveals a story of violence, drug trafficking, and connections with various social circles in Mexico, her luxurious lifestyle, and her links with politicians. Figures from the entertainment world and other prominent characters are testament to how the power of organized crime can infiltrate different aspects of society. If you like this video and want me to make one about another mafia boss, you can leave your requests here. I can't guarantee I'll make them depending on who we're talking about, but still leave your comments. He found the perfect way to slip between the shadows and go unnoticed, learning from the most experienced, analyzing what should and should not be done to never be caught. Better known as the Lord of the Skies or the King of White Gold, Amado Carrillo Fuentes became one of the most powerful mobsters in history and one of the most wanted in the 90s. Born on December 17, 1956 in La Tuna municipality of Badiraguatro, he showed from a very young age leadership skills and the makings to embark on the world of illegal substance trafficking. He soon left school aside to get involved in the illegal activities of his uncle Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, El Neto, one of the founders and leaders of the Guadalajara cartel. He started by taking care of crops in the green plant and serving as a mule for the transfer of this and other illicit substances. By his adolescence, He was already attributed with characteristics of obedience, discipline, insight, and a certain cunning to carry out the tasks delegated by his uncle. He was ruthless with his enemies. He had a reputation for dating different girls at the same time and a huge taste for alcohol and the so-called white gold. You know which one I'm referring to. However, he possessed a quality that stood out above the rest: generosity towards his people, which he never forgot, even at his peak as a boss. Since of all the wealth he was acquiring over time, he allocated a large part to his two towns, the one he was born in and the one where he built a farm for his mother, the latter in Huamuchilito. He installed gardens, schools, churches, and other services that made life easier for the inhabitants, but especially for his family and loved ones. From his beginnings in businesses of this kind, he kept a low profile. Little was known about him and where he lived. This was perhaps his best attribute, practically living in anonymity while learning from those who hold the most important positions. He was sent to Chihuahua by his uncle Fonseca with one of his partners named Pablo Acosta Villarreal, also known as the Zorro de Ojinaga. There he further enriched his knowledge about the previously mentioned crops and everything related to the business. 10 years passed while they worked shoulder to shoulder. He had become his protege and best disciple. He went from being a simple assistant to becoming second in hierarchy until, as it is well known that the student surpasses the teacher, Amado betrayed him and ordered him to be killed in April 1987. Something very common in these groups is betrayal. With the help of the then director of the Land and Maritime Air Interception of the Procuraduría General de la República, Guillermo González Calderoni, who gunned down the Fox of Ojinaga for the juicy amount of $1 million in payment, leaving the way clear for Amado Carrillo to assume total control of the Ojinaga drug trafficking group, which would later become the Juarez Cartel, one of the most powerful in Mexico. The liveliness of the couple was unprecedented, especially after the convenient friendship with Rafael Aguilar Guajardo, a former policeman from the Federal Security Directorate, from whom information was later leaked, affirming that he owned an exclusive nightclub in Mexico City called Premier, a property he shared with businessman Gerardo Terrazas. Aguilar and Carrillo quickly negotiated, and upon gaining mutual trust, the capo managed to get him to handle the illegal substances. The drug he brought from Colombia, they exchanged some contacts, and soon the traffic moved to the United States. By the end of the 80s, Amado slipped away into the shadows, leaving Jinaga. He arrived in Ciudad Juarez keeping a low profile, and it was there where the profits, according to Drug Enforcement Administration data, amounted to weekly amounts of up to $200 and $300 million. By that time, he had built such a large empire that they began to call him the Lord of the Skies. He owned a fleet of twin-turbine Boeing planes with 68 seats and Caravelle-type aircraft in which he transported up to 6 tons of merchandise. He managed to outperform the Colombian competition, especially the Cali Cartel, taking over the American markets in Chicago, Atlanta, Oklahoma, and Seattle. Working hand-in-hand with his partner Aguilar Guajardo, who wouldn't enjoy the enormous amounts of money he was acquiring for long, as he met the same fate as Pablo Acosta, being murdered on April 12, 1993, on a pier in Cancun, this in Quintana Roo in Mexico. Again, here we see the betrayal. Nothing seemed to stop the drug lord. His caution, intelligence, and lack of scruples made him act ruthlessly to achieve his own interests, regardless of who he takes along the way, and capable of betraying his own partners was what made him amass an impressive fortune. His businesses were going full sail, growing and expanding every day. So much so that in 1994, the United States government declared that the Juarez cartel handled 60% of the Colombian merchandise that arrived in that country through Mexico. It only took the Lord of the Skies 6 years to climb to the summit of the mafia. He pocketed the loyalty of police and military who helped him keep his identity secret. However, everything changed overnight on November 24, 1993, when he suffered an attack inside a restaurant in the Bali High of southern Mexico City. Although he was able to escape unscathed, as well as the rest of his family, thanks to the efforts of his bodyguard Icy de Ramon Magaña, better known as El Metro, his lifestyle took a 360-degree turn. Carrillo Fuentes became the main target of the authorities. By then, his name already appeared in 26 investigations in the United States and Mexico. There were 2 arrest warrants against him. In addition, the Drug Enforcement Administration offered a reward of $5 million, and the Attorney General's office offered 30 million pesos to anyone who could provide information leading to his arrest. Clearly the wooden pajamas. However, attempts to locate him seemed to be futile, as Amado had already built a huge protection network, all thanks to his juicy bribes with which he bought the silence and devotion of the most incorruptible. Thus, he was able to travel without worries between May and July of 1997 through Russia, Cuba, and Chile. This to increase his territory and distribute merchandise.
Being the owner of an empire that was growing every second, he had no intentions of spending the rest of his life behind bars.
So in his plans was the performance of plastic surgery and liposuction. After his face had already been revealed, his goal was to impersonate someone else and continue to dominate the market behind the scenes. However, from the moment this idea came into his head, the countdown began to the end of his era as one of the most powerful drug traffickers of the time. It was precisely his escape plan that would come with death ahead. A death that even now, just over 25 years later, continues to arouse curiosity because of the mysterious way in which he allegedly left this world. In the wake of his death, in quotes, some hypotheses emerged about what really happened on July 3rd, 1997. That day, Carrillo Fuentes, under the false name of Antonio Flores Montes, went to Santa Monica Hospital, located in Polanco, one of the most exclusive areas of Mexico City, ready to carry out his plan and change his physical appearance. He underwent surgery, led by one of the most recognized doctors of that time, the Colombian Ricardo Reyes. In fact, the doctor was fully aware of who he was performing the procedure on, and even though the intervention was successfully completed, the man died shortly after, allegedly due to the residual presence of anesthetic-type pharmacological agents. This according to data from the autopsy performed. And so, behind the door of room 407 at exactly 6 in the morning on July 4th, 1997, the official death of Amado Carrillo Fuentes, alias the Lord of the Skies, was declared. An event that would drag with it more blood, disappearances, revenges, and a myriad of theories and hypotheses related to such a shocking fact. Almost immediately, a statement was released by the Procuraduría General de la República in which it reported having received precise data on the death of Amado. This would soon be endorsed by the Drug Enforcement Administration without even having seen the body. A week passed when the body was finally publicly shown in an open casket, a coffin that allegedly housed the remains of the leader of the Juarez cartel. But at the same time, it left more questions in the air than certainties. Was that corpse the one of the most wanted drug lord of recent years? This is due to the strange presence of his characteristic mustache with which he would be buried, which undoubtedly had to have been shaved for the plastic surgery that was performed on him before his death. In addition, the rumor that the drug trafficker's employees who were called to identify the body assured that the ringleader had 2 extremely particular marks. A mole on his back covered with hair and a scar on a buttock. 2 things that apparently the subject in question did not show on his body. The press, you can imagine, went crazy with that topic, and the news articles quickly alluded to a double, especially after the disturbing coincidences that emerged days later. The disappearance of a commander of the Judicial Police of the district, Jose Luis Rodriguez, nicknamed El Chiquilin, put on the table by the media that it could be him who was truly mourned a few days ago. This is because he was lost track of just shortly before the events, and that he curiously had an amazing resemblance to the supposed deceased Carrillo Fuentes. The death of the ringleader caused a great stir, and despite the passage of time, the topic would not stop being discussed, much less after the sadistic discovery that was made known on a Sunday in November 1997, only 4 months after the death. It was on the road heading from Mexico City to the tourist port of Acapulco, a scene that screamed revenge behind the facts. 3 drums had been abandoned and quickly caught the attention of federal police. They gave off a foul smell despite being completely sealed with cement, and clearly some red stains could be seen that were presumed to be traces of blood. And indeed, when opening one of them, they got a disgusting surprise. Inside were human remains that were later identified as Jaime Godoy, Carlos Avila, and Ricardo Reyes, the 3 with signs of suffering and participants in the old operation of Amado Carrillo. they had been part of the medical team in the intervention, plus another doctor who was missing. This crime was never clarified, but it revealed another theory that indicated that they had been hired to kill the boss during his procedure. That's why their lives were taken away in a mode of revenge. However, there are other versions pointing out that they were the only ones who knew the truth. Allegedly, that Amado was alive living in Argentina or in Chile collaborating with the Drug Enforcement Administration. Strengthening these suspicions came in 1998 the testimony of Jaime Olvera, a collaborator and very close to Carrillo, who as a protected witness of the then Attorney General's office, declared that the body buried as the Lord of the Skies was not precisely that of Fuentes. As a result, he was executed. That same day, it seemed that a bullet was destined for those who dared to contradict the story that the man was dead. Certainly, nobody knew it. What I can assure was the tragic outcome that awaited anyone who put that topic on the table. Again, and from this. A journalistic work that took place in the year 1999 from Nabolato Wapuern, come biography of Amado Carrios Fuentes, was the title that ended the life of its author, Jose Alfredo Andrade Bojorquez, a journalist who dedicated part of his professional career to gather information about this surprising story apart from the narco culture. In this story, the strange disappearances that were on the rise. People who had one thing in common suggest that he also known as the King of the White Gold remained alive, perhaps hidden, retired, or as Drug Enforcement Administration collaborator. On the other hand, as a request for information, journalist Omar Sanchez from Tangal asked the Procuraduría General de la República for the results of the histopathological studies carried out on the kidney, liver, lung, brain marrow, myocardium, arm, and pancreas of the corpse supposedly analyzed years ago, as well as the results of the deoxyribonucleic acid identity. However, the response he received left more doubts than certainties, as the Special Sub-Prosecutor's Office for Investigations into Organized Crime reported that there were no expert or deoxyribonucleic acid tests to publicly know the cause, and assured that 7 different areas of the Procuraduría General de la República claimed not to have documents on previous inquiries or open investigations involving sources. Perhaps this enigma will never be able to be resolved. What is clear is that after the Lord of the Skies disappeared from the radar, who took charge of the fraudulent businesses was his brother Vicente, known as the Viceroy, was the head of the Juarez cartel, until his arrest on October 9, 2014. In the end, the farm located in Guamuchilito was only inhabited by the sisters and by the murky memories of one of the most powerful narco families in Mexico. It was 2008 and the story of Carlita, a decanter from a Mexican cell phone company, was on everyone's lips. The reason she had been found lifeless after being associated with a mafia boss known as El Teo. Carla Priscila Carrasco Agüero, 25 years old, used to work as a model for various brands and companies in Mexico. Her attributes and physical beauty were striking enough that everyone wanted to avail her services. However, there was a cell phone company she always worked with, so she began to be known as Carlita from Telcel. Men and women alike, as soon as they saw her, were struck by her appearance, so it was very common that events she attended were completely full, more than anything else, to see her. They hired Carlita, and just for that it's worth it, was what people were heard saying back in 2008. Carrasco Agüero was enjoying great fame and popularity despite not being someone who appeared on television or on social networks, which at that time were just beginning with Facebook and YouTube. But his popularity was such that it didn't take long to attract the attention of powerful people, among them drug traffickers and politicians. One of them was the boss known as El Teo, who won Carla's affection with attentions and gifts and with whom, unfortunately, she later became romantically involved. Moreover, after that, there was always that typical clueless businessman who wanted to win her over regardless of anything, to which the phrase, "Don't get your hopes up, she's dating a heavy hitter," always ended up surfacing. It was then that photographs and videos of her began to flood the internet, and while in most of them she was seen posing or simply dancing, there was one where she could be seen in very compromising situations, which of course didn't take long to go viral. Of course, considering the virality of those years, which was not as massive as today's. But if you are my age, you surely know who I'm talking about and you surely saw those videos. For that reason, it is said that Teo took matters into his own hands and took care of the person responsible for leaking the video, as well as sent Carlita heading to Ensenada with the purpose of her being calm and no one bothering her, because if, as a result of the audiovisual, she was being more harassed than usual. However, as Teo had enemies and they found out about his romance with the model, they decided to go after her. Some men, under the orders of another heavy hitter known as the Engineer, were in charge of following her to the city of Baja California. But the girl, who was then 25 years old, knew nothing about this and therefore continued her life as if nothing was happening. It was the end of November 2008. Carrasco Aguero was inside a business allegedly owned by her called Market Party, dedicated especially to wrapping and gifts, located on Pedro Loyola Street between Esmeralda Avenue and Sanguines Boulevard. It was around 7 in the evening when two men walked through the door and opened fire on Carlita. One shot hit her in the right wrist, but the other hit her in the upper body, which caused her to die almost instantly. Paramedics and other authorities, although they did not take long to arrive, only took care of gathering clues and collecting evidence, such as some shell casings. Minutes later, in streets close to the scene, the police located a black 93 model Honda Accord with tinted windows and no plates abandoned, so it was immediately linked to what had happened to this dean. But beyond the investigations by law enforcement, Teo began his own. The boss was extremely furious that his girlfriend's life had been taken, and understandably so.
It was no longer a matter of fighting over territories or anything like that.
On the contrary, it had become something personal. That's how this event triggered one of the strongest waves of violence ever seen in Mexico. Even the state government itself became aware of the situation. According to reports from the Baja California prosecutor at the time, Rommel Moreno Monjares, there were about 37 casualties, and all because they had taken Carlita's life. And although it is said that Teo ended the lives of most of the people involved, state authorities managed to arrest a man named Jose Luis Ibarra Carrillo, about 25 years old, who was supposedly responsible. On the other hand, there are those who claim that it was just a setup by the authorities to show someone as responsible, as it is very unlikely that the boss would have let go so easily of a thug who took the life of his partner.